You know what he's working on?
What?
He's working on a TV series called Major Mars. Now, he's been a Major Mars character. This is something that he's invented a long, long time ago. And he said they're talking. He's talking with real TV people to get it made into a series, Major Mars.
Okay.
And he's
I've
even
seen
talked
the film.
Yeah.
That they did.
Well,
with that.
this is going to be an even bigger deal. And he says he wants to.
Yeah.
He wants to play Major Mars.
Of course.
Of course. Who else?
Who wants to be a star?
Yeah.
Well, okay. What we're going to do now is sort of move on. Actually, what was going to happen is I'm going to... No, I'm not. I'm not going to do that.
No, he's going to do something else, folks. You should see what he just put down.
I'm not putting it down.
No.
Anyway,
it's crawling off into the corner.
We're glad we can do this.
It's whimpering.
I hope it stays there. It's awfully ugly.
Don't say that.
It's dripping and green.
It thinks it's handsome, and I certainly don't want to change it.
No.
Hey, me doing it. Stop this.
It's bigger than all of us.
Yeah, well, let's not...
So what we're going to do here is after those tickets are given away, we are going to thank you, and this is our way of saying thank you for the fundraising. In a way, I'm sorry we couldn't do it around fundraising, and in a way, I'm happy that we're not, that it's just free, gratis, and for nothing.
By the way, next time we do fundraising, there's some big stuff we have for premiums.
We have some very interesting materials. We're going to be doing that in November, by the by.
Yeah, stay tuned for that,
Don't
folks.
don't
touch that dial.
Just because we're pitching doesn't mean that there isn't good stuff around. And
Yeah, trust me, this is going to be okay.
well,
I know you don't trust him, but you can trust me.
has he lied to you yet?
Not yet,
No,
but I'm
they
working
know
on
of.
it. No. Soon, and for the rest of your life.
Now, as soon as those tickets are given away, we will we'll let you all know. And I hope I must say I noticed that when I started to talk about it, 2 lines lit up before I had mentioned what it was we were doing.
They don't care what it is as long
They
as it's
don't
free.
They trust you, man.
Yeah.
What a terrifying thought! Because
right.
well,
Well, they'll have a good time down there at the mountain, or up
They
there at
will,
the
up
mountain,
there,
depending
yes.
on where they
Yes,
are.
and we're
Yeah,
gonna be
you've
there
got
then.
some alligator farms in Florida you'd like to sell them.
Bridge
No,
Brook that we'd like to
don't
unload,
trust
yeah.
you.
We
Won't
can
do
make
that.
money on this.
I'd rather make money the way you do it.
Oh, okay.
And speaking of that, I was amused. While we were talking to Bob Burns, I kept thinking of how you and Larry opened the Dream Park book. Do you see the parallel there?
Oh, yeah.
And the parallel is, for those of you who haven't seen it yet or might have forgotten, Steve and Larry took the folks on a tour of Los Angeles underwater.
Oh, yes?
Wilshire Boulevard.
Lloyd Bridges, where are you when we need you?
Right. You know, I haven't had a chance to tell you face to face. Like Dream Park a lot.
Oh, hi. Are
Good
the tickets all
story.
gone?
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, they are.
We enjoyed writing it.
Oh, they're not all gone?
Really good.
Oh, I can get
You
one.
have done some good stuff
Wow,
since then.
thanks.
You have a story in The Magic
Yeah,
Returns,
right.
right?
Yeah, Matthew Return story
Okay, my name's
called
Danny.
But Fear Itself.
And my last name
And
is
it's basically a
T-W-E-D.
story which utilizes Larry's
T-W-E-D.
Warlock world mythos to tell an African
T-T.
folk tale
Yeah,
about a group of people called the Ibandi, which I really enjoyed
Right.
using that name because I, long
Okay,
before I got published back in high school, I had a hero, a sword and sorcery
Yeah.
hero named Eros the Adventurer, who was a member of the Ibandi African tribes. So I just dredged up that name and reused it in the story and, sold it. So I
Is
got
that a made-up
behind the
name?
orange curtain.
Oh, it's a made-up name,
Sounds good.
Nothing ever gets thrown away.
Nothing ever
no,
gets thrown away.
right.
God, I've still got a 222-verse epic of ballad,
it's
the Ballad of
96.
Eros the Thief, and one day I'm going to find a way to make somebody pay for that turkey. It is
This is
fruitier than you'd believe.
You're getting a real insight now into what a writer is really like. We never throw
Okay.
anything away.
Scavenge themselves.
That's
5, 8,
right.
Just put it through the Cuisinart again.
I'm doing the same thing. I'm working on a story. I have this fantasy thing I wrote, and in it is a 2-line reference
Oh.
to a blind person
Mm-hmm.
who is a poet who regains his sight and then blinds himself. And this is the theme of a story I'm writing
No,
set
right now.
entirely differently than this thing.
It's a really bad
you
idea.
Cannibalize you. It ain't bad. It ain't bad.
This is, you never throw anything.
No. I have used names again.
It's in my head, so never throw anything away.
This is
Okay, all gone? All right,
all
okay,
gone?
that's
Yeah.
it. All of the passes are gone. They are all gone, so
Thank
thank
you
you,
for
very
calling.
much for calling, and I apologize if you couldn't get through.
But they can go anyway.
They can indeed.
Pay a couple of bucks and go in.
It'll be worth it, folks.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, and
You can trust Bob Burns.
you can indeed.
Boy, does he put on
Bob
a
does
show.
good show.
Yeah, he really
So
is.
thank you very much, but we have no more passes. They have all been given away. Thank you very much for calling in, and hope you got them. If not, stay tuned. You never know when Hour 25 is going to do something really strange.
Like have
Anyway,
Steve Barnes on their program.
Like Steve Barnes, exactly, because This is exactly the point.
Give away an
The
autograph
story,
copy of the story.
the story that that we're going to hear tonight, that you wrote, was actually written on this program. You came down. When was it?
Oh, it was at the it was at the end of December. I did the last 2-hour 25 shows
Of
of
last year.
1970, 1980.
Last two?
Yeah, the last
That's
two.
right.
It was
Before
spread
the
over
Sherlock
2 different
Holmes.
shows.
That's right.
And I've got like 3 hours of hour 25 listener tapes, people discussing the idea that I came up with. And around in March, I started working on the story. I was still working on another collaboration with Larry called The Descent of Anansi, and I had to get some stuff on that out of the way and another story out of the way. And I finished the story, probably sometime in May, I guess. No, wait a minute. It took me longer than that. It was written and then rewritten and then rewritten because I felt that people had cared enough about the idea to deserve the best work that I was capable of. You may like the story or you may hate it, but I guarantee you I can't write any better than this.
Have you sold it?
No, you're going to be the first people to hear it besides just a few friends.
Is it strange to write with somebody else's ideas?
No, because actually all they were doing was giving me, it was like doing research. You know, there were a whole lot of ideas, and I wrote down, it must have been close to 70 or 80 separate points of interest. And then I had to determine how many of those could I work into a story that was short enough to be read on the air, at all. And then try to figure out what perspective I wanted to take on the whole thing. And then I just treated it like research material. Some of it had to do with the story I wanted to tell. Some of it had to do with a larger matrix that the story is one piece of. There are references to incidents and a couple of characters even who do not have as large a part in the story as some emotional significance which is attached to them might indicate, because I know what the whole story is. There's a book that this story is one piece of, and I may never write the book, but I had to know what the overall story was to be able to pick out from there an incident which to me was representative of what was happening. And those of you who don't remember what the original idea was are out of luck.
I was going to ask you if you want to describe it, but I guess you want to save it to the reading. Or can you talk about it in
very,
general
very
terms?
briefly, the idea has to do with this. I have a feeling that there are a lot of men who are threatened by the fact that women can have babies and they cannot. The basic differences between men and women a lot of them were removed by the Industrial Revolution. Those differences which had to do with strength have been removed by machines and the gun. Those differences which had to do with the ability to own property and so forth and hold office have been legislated away in our court system. What remains is a society where men and women are growing more and more equal under the eyes of the law. But there is still one thing that women can do that men cannot, and that is have babies. And eventually, unless we're hit with a devastating war or something that throws us back to a pre-machine age state, that is likely to turn into political power, and things are likely to start swinging into the balance, for the ladies. And so I was just saying that we can see a certain amount of male backlash now, and what would happen if a lot of women continued in the present trend of having children without men there. There are a lot of women, a lot of divorced women who feel perfectly comfortable raising the children by themselves, a lot of single women who are deciding to raise children, and there are militant feminist communes in Northern California and Oregon and Washington where women are going to have their children away from the influence of men altogether. And I said, if 2 or 3 or 5% of the women in this country decided to go that route, there would be hell to pay. And you would see militant masculine supremacists rising up and just really causing a hassle over this, because the fear it would generate would be enormous. So my question was, what would happen if 2 or 3 or 4% instead of 1/10 of 1% of women decided voluntarily to have their children without men there? And the story deals with a world in which this is starting to happen.
And the story you will hear in about 25 minutes or so, more or less. Okay, now let's talk about the whole business of creating science fiction. All right, you have just created a story.
Yes.
All right, tell us what's going to happen next.
Well, that particular story will undoubtedly go to my agent more for commentary than sale. I have discovered over the past few months that short stories sort of fall between the boards with a large agent. You know, when I have an agent who just finished negotiating the contract for, you know, Robert Heinlein's new book, and, you know, we're talking high 6 figures or low 7 figures. She's really not going to be too enthusiastic about selling a story that's going to net her maybe $70, because, you know, it earns me $700, and so it'll earn her $70. No matter how much she likes the story and how much she likes me, she's simply not. It's science fiction. You know, Ed Furman, I believe.
You're not thinking of Playboy or Omni or some of the big paying markets for this?
Actually, now that you mention it, I probably will send it to Playboy first. It never hurts.
Right. All they can do is say no.
Besides, I love collecting Playboy rejection slips. They're printed on such nice paper. You know, I have this wonderful file full of rejection slips.
The first time I got a rejection slip from Playboy, I expected women, right, on the rejection slip, and all I got was this little black and white rabbit.
Yeah.
It was, what a disappointment that was. The best rejection slip I ever got, though, was from Boy's Life magazine. I'd sent them what I thought of as a juvenile.
It was the same story you sent to Playboy, wasn't it?
Yeah, maybe that's the problem.
Uh-huh.
And it was just terrific. It was a printed, just regular standard rejection slip, but it was like, gee, we liked your story, but we just can't use it now. We're awfully sorry. And
gee whiz,
gosh, yeah, boy. And it made you feel so glad just to be alive. Just
on my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God, my country, and Boys Life magazine, and your story doesn't.
And your story doesn't.
That's right.
Yeah. Or
our motto was be prepared, and you weren't.
And you weren't. Yeah.
Yes.
Or actually, your motto should be prepared for this rejection.
Yeah. Ed Bryant gave me a rejection slip once that said no.
You know, like, I had to get to the point where I looked forward to getting the rejection slip. You know, where I got
to psych yourself down for that.
And the first time I didn't get one, you know, and I got instead a neatly typed letter of someone not just rejecting the story, but explaining what might have been changed. But I was actually disappointed. I said, "What do you mean? No form? I'm not a human being. Just send me a rejection slip, and be damned with it." And it was kind of a strange mental set. And the first time I actually got a check from a magazine, I sort of looked at it and said, what am I supposed to do with this?
Spend it, boy, spend it.
Reject it.
Yeah, you know.
Sending, I'm sorry, your check does not meet our specifications, but thank you very much for thinking of us. Well, you know what's worse than getting rejection slip?
No, Mike, what's worse?
Not hearing.
Oh,
I sent a story
yeah.
to Twilight Zone magazine in July. I'm going crazy. And as I was telling somebody or other, I know that they're not sitting in editorial conference going, well, I don't think this is quite ready for a Pulitzer, but or trying to figure out how many checks they have to clear. I know it's sitting under 4,000 other manuscripts in somebody's slush pile. They haven't gotten to it yet, and I wish they'd hurry up. I don't care if they reject it. I just want to know. It's driving me bananas.
I had a story rejected by Twilight Zone about a month and a half ago called Pandora's Fox. And about a pair of little mammals who only mate just before earthquakes.
Wonderful. Boy, were they busy this morning or last night?
And they rejected it on the grounds that it was too violent. And this is for a magazine whose, I think, first issue contained a story by Stephen King where, like, a 9-year-old boy claws his eyes out, you know.
Yeah, but that worked.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, if I was Stephen King, I could have gotten away with it.
How long did it take you before they reported?
Not a whole long time, but my agent...
Well, I got a postcard.
No.
Did you get that postcard that said they were 2 months behind or something?
I got a postcard saying they had received it, and that was in July.
No, I got a different kind of postcard.
Yeah, well, you got a check, too. They accepted yours.
Once I got it. Well, before, they've got
We read that story. We hate you, you know. We're going to get you tonight.
You?
Yes.
Tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably right after we put on the tape of your
right after.
Sure.
If you listen closely, you may hear the
thing
gurgling
in the corner is
sounds of Mel Gilden being strangled.
Mel Gilden's
thumbs
last
to the
moments
carotid
on
arteries.
Earth. Next week.
That's
all right.
right.
So anyway, back to the thing here. So you're going to submit it to Playboy. They may reject it. They may not. All right. So then maybe
Over the
FNSF.
Yeah.
Okay. What?
I'll work my way down the word. Is
that do you go by money? I mean, entirely? Do you say, gee, Ed Furman will really like this, or George Sithers will really like this, or do you say, Ed Furman only pays 3 cents a word?
Sure, I will. To me, money represents how successful I am in communicating something.
Counter in the game.
Because, it's a counter in the game. Money itself has no real meaning for me until I turn it into something.
That's it.
Dollars in my pocket are meaningless if I exchange it in exchange for food or electrical power or something. Then that's nice, but it's abstracted barter, and it shows me if I make $100 on the story, then that is indicative that I sold it to a magazine that has a very limited subscription circle. If I sell it for $10,000, it says that here's this editor who has to choose stories which are suitable for an audience of several million, and he thinks that my story is going to entertain a significant proportion of those people. Now that's a very nice thing to feel, and that's what, you know, in terms of my emotional reactions to the money. I mean, I love to pay my bills, but I don't get a whole lot of emotional satisfaction. I get the relief of not having the bills, but the happiness comes from thinking, hey, I did something that touched these people, or that this experienced man thinks is going to touch a large number of people, and that means something.
Do you ever write stories anymore, or ever, that when you're finished with it, and maybe it's even a final draft, and you decide that you don't want anybody to see it ever for one reason or another?
No, I've got a couple of friends that I let look at virtually everything I write, and in one case I wrote a story called Gas War back during the time when everybody was waiting in lines for gasoline, and I had this story about a culture in which everybody's car was equipped with little gasoline computers and shortwave radios, and all the gas stations were sending out statistics on how much gas they had left, and your car would compute whether or not it had a good chance of making it to a given gas station, would give you your best probability of making it, and all people are competing, and people are putting up barriers and shooting one another, trying to keep each other from getting the gas, and it was a turkey story.
There, yeah.
You know, the story just didn't work, and one of my friends looked at this story and just, you know, he used it to do something unmentionable with him. It was just really loser material. And one of these days I may rework it into something usable, but I will let somebody look at it, if for no other reason that we can all have a good laugh.
Now, you're not a Clarion grad, right? I mean, you've never been to Clarion.
No, it's one of the great disappointments.
No,
How can I possibly make a living as a writer?
Stop.
Excuse me.
Will you stop that? I'm trying to get to a real question, and the real question is, do you have a feeling about writers' workshops in Clarion in particular?
Only
Or
if...
have we just heard it?
Or have we just heard it?
No. My opinion is that if the class is taught by someone who has actually been and done, then it's going to be of value. If it's not by someone who's been and done, then it's likely to be taught by someone who wants to be and is afraid to be. And they're going to pass their bad habits on to you. I think that if I could have gone, there was a time I would have chopped off the little finger of my left hand to go to Clarion.
But not anymore.
Not anymore. I would like to go to Clarion one day and teach. Or assistant teach, or just be there in that environment with all these writers who are shut up there for 8 weeks or 9 weeks, whatever it is, doing nothing but writing. I can think of no better way to take a vacation than to do that and just pound my head into pretzels.
There is a sort of a Clarion, what I call, never having seen it, a Clarion graduate school, and that's Milford, or what was Milford.
As a matter of fact,
you were there too, right?
I was there too, yeah, and there's going to be one held this weekend or the next weekend in Milford, in Eugene, Oregon.
Any workshop or any class is only as good as the people who are sharing. It's the experience. I love being around people who know things I do not know, or who know the same things that I know, or who need to know something that I know. As long as that sense of connection is there and the flow is going on there, that's wonderful.
That's the main thing that's good about it. As opposed to, as you say, most college writing courses.
Yeah, I had some teachers. Okay, there were a few teachers throughout my education who helped me a lot with my writing, but mostly it was through acknowledging that I was trying, acknowledging me as a person. A lady named Mrs. Otternitz in junior high school, a guy named Gary Hart in college.
A senator from Colorado?
No, it was a writing instructor, English teacher at Pepperdine University, a guy named Jim Wayland, a lady named Norma Chalfin, another lady named Rona King. But a lot of the teachers I knew, they were too intimidated by the work of the masters. They were so hung up on Hemingway or Faulkner or Steinbeck that they could not get past the rough draft stage. They'd look at the rough draft and they'd say, "Patooey, this is terrible. I'm embarrassed. I'll never show it to anybody because it's not as good as the work of the masters." They were crippled by their own fear. So they never got past it, and they never got to the place where they were able to create spontaneously. They did not believe in what is really a basic truth. Anybody can create art. Whether or not you're capable of creating saleable art is almost besides the point. Art is just self-expression. Successful art is art which is communicated to someone else, and you receive money in return for that, and that shows you how wide an audience you're reaching. But art is just self-expression. It's nothing more than that, and nobody can really. You can say that you consider something to be art, you consider something to be good art, but you can't really say whether or not it's art. Art's art, and your opinions about it don't really make any difference.
One of the problems, one of the prejudice, I guess it's a prejudice that I ran into when I first started writing, especially among my parents and various relatives and people who knew me, was that somehow there was this feeling that that art, in particular writing, because that's what I was going after, is something that's always done by somebody you don't know. And it's sort of a magic
The
process.
expert from afar.
From afar,
Yes.
yeah, and books sort of appear on stands and in libraries overnight as mushrooms do. And and that to actually know someone who has actually labored over a typewriter in putting words on paper is not quite real. And it takes a little bit extra relating before they understand
You know,
it
the
or
writing is
feel it.
considered like the either fourth or fifth sexiest occupation. Sexiest is being a bank executive. Next is being a doctor. Next is being a lawyer. Next is being a professional athlete. And then fifth is being a professional writer.
Not by anybody who's done it.
And I sit around in your underwear typing.
So
you know.
money is not the only reward, guys.
You know, there is another thing like that, and that is, at least for me as a writer, I am still amazed to. It takes me. I have to work to make the connection between my sitting at a kitchen table going type, 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 and seeing a book or a story on the shelf in print.
Yeah.
It's real hard to make that connection because I can open the book and look, and I remember I was sitting there, I was drinking a cup of coffee, and I could not finish this scene. I can put myself back into that scene when I was writing it, and to see it now, antiseptic, sterile, if you will, without the associations.
Well, you know,
Very
one of the
strange.
problems is your creative mode is right-brained. Your analytical mode, when you're reading it again, is left-brained. It's like one side of your personality talking to the other side, if you do it properly. You know, you switch from one mode to the other. You don't try to think while you're creating. You just do it, write a few paragraphs, then maybe you go back over and analyze it.
Does that trigger anything in you when you read a story of yours in print? Do you remember where you were when
I
that
didn't
phrase
write
hit?
that story.
No.
I mean, obviously the person
Okay.
who's reading that story. I mean, I didn't. Who wrote that? Gremlins wrote it.
Yeah, but you're getting paid for it.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I know.
what's even worse than not believing you wrote that story is believing it and not liking it.
Oh.
That's even worse, you know,
I-
because it's there for the ages, you know.
To most of the people I know who really consider themselves to be fine artists continually are upset with not being able to communicate the vision. In other words, you have 100% vision and you never communicate 100% of it.
Never.
You always come, you know, and then if you continue to grow and you get better, you read it at another point and your vision is much clearer, so it's a much smaller, you know, proportionally smaller fraction of what you are now capable of visualizing, unless you're capable of remembering where you were at the time.
Yeah.
And you know that, you know, you feel proud of yourself for having come that far, but you say that was the best I could do at that time, and it didn't sell and it was unsuccessful, but I did my best and I expressed myself. That's me. That was me.
Speaking of That Is Me, this is KPFK Los Angeles.
No, that's not
Listener-sponsored,
you. You may
non-commercial
think it's
Pacifica
you.
Radio. Me is Mike Hodell, along with Mel Gilden, doing Hour 25, Science and Science Fiction. Our guest this evening, Steve Barnes.
Oh, yeah.
And stay tuned. In a few moments, you're going to hear the story that you, the Group Mind, helped create almost a year ago. Okay, so, what are you working on now that you've finished? I keep forgetting, what is the title of this story?
The title of the story you're going to hear is Flashpoint.
Flashpoint. That's an awful
The point at
long
which
way to-
something catches fire.
Like a Larry Niven title.
There's several
Fahrenheit
different...
451.
In terms of what I'm working on right now, I'm cleaning up a book called The Descent of Anansi, which is about the attempted hijacking of a space shuttle that I just finished writing with Larry, and it still needs a little work, but the rough draft is finished, and we've got past the second draft stage, and there's still some work that needs to be done. And I just signed a contract for my first solo novel, which I'm going to be doing for Ace Books. It's called Street Lethal, and it's about the development of the first true aphrodisiac. And I've got a martial arts book going, a nonfiction one, textbook, and I've got way down the pipe somewhere, I'm just starting research for right now. I've got a screenplay in mind, which is sort of like, the screenplay is also involves martial arts, and I'll say it's like Stephen King writing for Bruce Lee. It's a Lovecraftian martial arts film. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Lovecraftian martial arts.
Yes, it'll be like nothing you've ever seen, I guarantee you. But Street
I'm not
Lethal is the
prepared to
most
argue that.
important one. I have to have it delivered by next June, and it is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the most important project I've ever worked on. I'm just going to be killing myself on it. It may be good, it may be bad, but I guarantee you it'll be the best I can make it.
Where does it stand now? Have you done any work on it?
Oh, yeah, it's a little bit more than half finished right now.
And it's due in June?
It's due in June, and I want to have the rough draft finished by January 1st. I want to have the whole thing finished by March the 1st. That'll give me time to polish and polish and polish, because it's really important. The first solo project is really important in terms of establishing your identity. As it is right now, I'm, a Niven collaborator. I've gotten into the public eye to a certain degree, and people understand me. But where would Jerry Pournelle be if all he were known for were being a Niven collaborator? If he weren't known for those marvelous science books, if he weren't, known for other things, or Dave Gerald, he did, is it The Flying Sorcerers? If you're just known for collaborating with a man who can win awards all by himself, then you begin to worry. People begin to say, well, a talking horse could collaborate with Larry Niven; it would still be great. It's working with Larry is very easy because he is so talented, and so the obligation is to get out there and prove you can do it alone.
Because there's always that little tickle in the back of your head, isn't there? Could I have done it alone?
You bet. You bet. The Descent of Anansi, I could absolutely not have done alone. Dream Park, maybe. It wouldn't have been the same book, and I don't think it would have been as good, but maybe. Descent of Anansi, not a prayer, because it dealt with too much complex astrophysics. I just couldn't have handled it.
Do you think you will collaborate again, or are you going to solo from here on out?
I'm going to solo.
I know you said you're working on
I'm going to solo for a while. I owe it to myself, and I owe it to the time that I think that, I would get a great deal of satisfaction. People who know me would, and Larry would get a great deal of satisfaction out of seeing me create some work, on my own, to just start developing my own style. In a couple years, I think it would be wonderful to get back together with Larry, or sooner or later, depending on what happens. But the important thing for me to concentrate on now is developing myself as an artist, to create for myself a space in which the writing is a direct expression of me, and the way I see the world and the way I experience life. It's real important.